Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today it has finally happened. It's time to start working on settling some of these debates. X-Plane 12 has released. I purchased it today, guys, so that way I could give you guys my first impressions of the new simulator, or new version of the simulator I should say, and today we're going to check some of it out. If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkill's tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, please consider joining me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future updates and future guides that will be coming down the road. Link to Patreon can be found in the description below. Alright guys, so let's get a few things out of the gate right away. I want to make a couple of disclaimers before we get into this. Number one, first and foremost, this is day one release. It is also an early access release, which Laminar Research has made very clear that it is early access. Okay, those are very, very important to remember when you were talking about any kind of first impressions, reviews, expectations, whatever you want to call it. This is very critical for you guys to keep at the forefront of your mind. Okay, because otherwise you will be judging the simulator unfairly, and that is something that I am definitely trying to make sure that I do not do in this video. This is not going to be a judgment video about which is necessarily better or worse. Today I am simply displaying what X-Plane 12 has to offer in this particular release. Which brings me to the next point. Microsoft Flight Simulator now has over 2 years under its belt to resolve a lot of the issues and things that we have experienced with it, and we all know that it has been a very rough and frustrating ride. So we need to make sure that we keep our minds open, our thoughts open, and understand that if we were willing to give Microsoft Flight Simulator the run that it has given, let's make sure to be open-minded and fair when it comes to X-Plane 12. Again, I am not trying to peg one amongst the other. I am simply trying to showcase the newer version of X-Plane. X-Plane, let's talk about some of the benefits historically from X-Plane to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, I know a lot of this is subjective. Keep that in mind, that opinions are going to vary on this next statement. One of the things I'm going to be looking for is flight modeling, weather impact, weather dynamics of the overall simulator. Obviously, graphics are going to be a very big one that we need to talk about. Satellite imagery is something that obviously is, at the moment that we know of, not available in X-Plane 12, and certainly available, as we all know, in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So it's going to be more of a showcase of how do the aircraft fly. Do I feel any kind of difference between the two simulators? Obviously, you guys know I have a ton of Microsoft Flight Simulator experience under my belt. That is what made the channel boom the way it has boomed. And then X-Plane 11, I flew quite a bit beforehand, but I was very, very heavy into DCS World, I would say, during the X-Plane 11 heyday. Okay, now, I am super excited to own this. I am very grateful that I purchased it. I have no problem with the fact that I did so. I also want you guys to keep in mind that none of my controls are really set up. I've set up the rudders and stick and throttle. That's about it. So it's going to be a lot of point and click, and a lot of it may be a little bit on the clunky side. But I promise, that will obviously be resolved in future videos. This is just going to be one of many videos, and we're just going to scratch the surface. We are here at my hometown in Tucson International Airport. We're going to sort of take the Cessna 172 here up for a spin. We're going to listen to the sounds. We're going to take a look at the textures and point out some of the things that have already stood out to me, both good and bad. Now, it's going to be very, very difficult to not make this a comparison to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Again, right now, it is absolutely the booming simulator, I would say, on the market. Speaking of a lag right there, there's a little bit of something right there. So let's go ahead and get started with that right away. Okay, so coming right out of the gate, one of the things that I really enjoy about Microsoft Flight, I'm going to do it, that I really enjoy about X-Plane 12 here is the external views. I've always preferred the ability to just simply be able to use my mouse, right click. I know that sounds silly, but I am going to be looking for creature comforts as well, and this is definitely one of them. Now, this is Tucson International Airport, and here at Tucson International Airport, we have... this is pretty accurate. There's some things that aren't quite right already. But for example, the National Guard is back over here. We do have some of these buildings in the true world here. These hangars, I believe, actually are there. These ones that we're looking at right in front of us. I don't know about those ones there in the back. I can't recall if they are there or not. That building, I believe, is. So there's going to be some, catches there, obviously, in the scenery. We all know that that's, one of the defaults or the downside effects, I would say, of X-Plane 12. However, looking at the overall graphics, if you look at the textures here on the ground, that's phenomenal. I'm absolutely okay with this. I think that looks great. I love the crack in the road. You can very clearly see that's a paved road and not just a solid, texture. It actually looks like rocking and cracking. You can see even the way that they did the cracks is very nice. It's not just the same pattern repeated. At least if it is, they've done it in a way where you can't really tell. Some of the things that are standing out to me right away is some of the coloring effects. A lot of the colorings are very, very saturated, I would say. Some of the greens and the yellows are a little too bright, but, it is what it is. Now, let's talk about the airplane here for a second. One of the things that has stood out to me right away is the lighting system on these airplanes. I do think right out of the gate is better than Microsoft Flight Simulator. Look at the strobe light here and the way it's blinking. Okay, now, shouldn't really be on yet, but actually, is that the strobe light? That might be the anti-collision light. But if you look at the way that the lights are rotating up here on the tail and then over here on the wingtip, look at the way that they're shining here inside of the wingtip. There's a massive difference between what we see there than what we see in most of the aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think the lights look a lot more realistic, much more realistic. And I will say the overall modeling of the plane looks much more realistic to me. I think this is a much better representation than what we see in, the other simulator. The colors aren't quite as saturated on the plane, for example, as they are here on the taxiway. They look much more natural. They look a little bit more, not quite as vibrant, which is nice. The reflections are done in a much more what I am seeing as a realistic way. So that is something that I am thoroughly happy about. I'm glad about that. One of the things, if we want to check out real quick, let's go ahead and take a look at what my graphics settings are. I cranked them all up pretty high. So we can go to, hang on a second, you guys got to bear with me. I got to remember how to do this. It is the same menu as what we saw before. Flight configuration is what I want. Okay, and then we come up here to settings. So you guys, if you played X-Plane 11, you know the UI. That hasn't changed. I've got just about everything maxed out for the moment. Now keep in mind, I'm also running in Windows mode or windowed mode. So I don't know how much of that is actually causing an impact. Probably very, very little, honestly, to be true to that there. But it is definitely there here. Flight models per frame. Let's see here. To default fastest. Okay, we would definitely want to keep that at the fastest. So all of these settings, guys, again, if you are familiar with X-Plane 11, you'll be familiar with it here in X-Plane 12. The UI is the same, and honestly, I am all for that. I don't understand why certain products change their UI from version to version. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's go ahead and get back into the plane if I can remember how. Let's go to view. Oh, wait. Default view, W. There we go. Okay, and I can still do that. Yep, okay. Now, on the interior textures here, I gotta be honest. I think these look better than Microsoft Flight Simulator. And you guys, some of you might be spitting at the monitor, cussing me out right now. You might be yelling at me. I don't know. But, and maybe it's just one of those things that, you have to kind of get used to. I don't know. But right out of the gate, I think it's better. I really do. Again, I think it has to do with the coloring. The depth is far better. The visibility and readability, I feel, of the gauges is better. I don't know, guys. Maybe I'm losing my mind here. But I'm also going to tell you one of the biggest reasons why I chose to start out with the Cessna 172. The Cessna 172 and Microsoft Flight Simulator, I think we would all agree. And if it wasn't for the latest steam gauge enhancement and that pack that was just recently released on the Just Flight website, the Cessna 172 default in the game was lacking by far. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this compares. And the parking brake is off. Shame on me. All right, so let's turn the taxi light on. I don't want to waste too much time yakking about things that I can yak to. I am going to hit the insert key 212 times looking for that. Oh, wait. Man, this is where it's going to be tricky again. Alright, so where... It says I have my taxi light on, but I actually don't see any indication that it's on. Oh, there it is. It's on the wing. Turn your aircraft there, Mike. And see, The little star reflection, the what are they called? Sun rays, God rays? I can't remember what they call They're a little intense in my opinion, but I like the way as you rotate the camera, the visibility of the light almost goes away. Come back in, and that probably needs to be adjusted a bit more, but I think that's pretty nice. Okay, now W. W will get me back here. Okay, and then I can use the up arrow to change that. I can use my mouse to sort of kick myself down there. The parking brake, as we discovered, is already released. Oops. And let's see what we got here. Again, a lot of this is going to be mouse and click kind of thing for a minute. All right, so let's start adding some power. Let's listen to some sounds. I'm just going to do a taxi out to the runway here, guys, and let you guys just sort of listen to what's going on. Okay, hang on tight. Just dawned on me what's going on there, so bear with me. That's not their fault. Again, flight configuration. Let's see here. Joystick, right? And then I need to find my rudder pedals, and I just need to reverse the axis on the toe brakes, which makes sense. I have to do that in just about every game that I use these in. So Microsoft Flight Simulator might actually be the only one that I don't. All right, so let's see. So first thing I'm noticing right out of the gate, I don't have to apply near as much power as I did in Microsoft Flight Simulator to get the aircraft to start turning. Definitely having to use differential tow or differential braking, although the rudder is responding, but not very much, which makes sense if memory serves. I don't believe in this particular aircraft that the nose wheel is attached to the rudder pedals. Ooh. Alright, so I probably have to adjust some sensitivity. The toe brakes are very, very responsive. Very, very responsive. Let's get some flaps down just to see. Oof. Okay, so again, any of the weird behavior you guys are seeing here on the ground, that's all sensitivity talking. I need to adjust my sensitivity curves on my controls, and obviously get used to it. So let's stop the airplane for just a second. I'm going to turn those landing lights on. Bring the yoke back. I'm going to try to keep the yokes on as long as possible. Now, honestly, I have not checked what the weather is at the moment, so we could very easily be taking off with a tailwind. But that's just one of those things that sometimes has to happen. For the sake of science. I'm not sure how this is science. It probably has nothing to do with science. Discovery? Let's use discovery. Although it looks like I might be okay. I can't tell. Maybe not. No, I'm not okay. We're taking off with a tailwind. Okay, well, it happens. Okay, let's just hope it's not too fast. Alright, let's do a quick controls check. Looks good. Alright, here we go. Some nice sounds in my opinion. Having to use some right rudder to compensate. Airspeed alive. Looking for 55 knots. Probably go for 60 because of that tailwind. There's 60 and coming back. Whoa, baby. Alright, now I'm going to get those flaps up for a second. I know we're not 300 feet at AGL, anywhere close to it, but that's what I'm working with at the moment. And actually, you know what? Hold on a second. Let's do this. Okay, there we go. Now that I'm crashing. Okay, so we're definitely going to have to set up some curves on the camera. There's quite a few things that are a little on the goofy side. It's like the head continues to go afterwards, so it's going to take some getting used to. Start taking her around and taking a look at things. Oh, looks like my turning wheel's already set up. That's nice. Whoa. Okay, yeah, the camera is weird. The camera's going to take a minute to dial in, but that's neither here nor there. All right, so obviously flying around Tucson, not my city, right? It's not Tucson. Gonna have to look into third-party scenery. That's just the nature of what we have to do. Inside the cockpit, sort of just seeing what the aircraft does right now. We're gonna go ahead and come to the right. Work on a very sloppy touch and go. Sort of get an idea of how the aircraft feels now. My camera is so low. Like, this is... There we go. All right, there we go. That's better. I think the sounds are better. I really do. So far, the overall flight performance of the Cessna 172 seems a bit more realistic. Yes, I have flown a 172 before. And it's nothing game breaking, right? It's nothing day and night. Oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever. You have to have Expert 12 in order to enjoy the 172. No, it's not that. Not that at all. But there is a difference, absolutely. The aircraft does feel more like a plane than what I would say that what I see in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But nothing that you're going to go home and miss without it. You know what I mean? The ground performance of the aircraft, I think, was significantly different in X-Plane 12 versus Microsoft Flight Simulator. The rotation, there was a major difference there. It seemed much smoother. I felt like I had more control of the rotation than I did in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's start pulling some of these back. Let's see. Oof. Now that lofting effect from the flaps coming down. And this time we're actually going to land into the wind. Oh, I'm getting too slow. We are very, very low. Again, all this is a little weird. Remember, I don't have any of my controls set up the way I should. We're going to go full flaps here. Make that turn on to final. Let's try to make something that's semi-coordinated, shall we? We can get us back on center line. Set for about 1600, 1700 RPMs. Looking at my target. Looks like we got a bit of a crosswind today. Crossing over the numbers, pulling those throttles back. Oof. Come on, give me a stall warning. Okay, that was pretty horrible on my part. Oh. Okay, I'm not sure why my wheel brakes locked up there, but that certainly had nothing to do with... Come on, baby. Wow, I am all over the place, aren't I? This is terrible. So this is what I'm talking about. I intentionally let that roll a little bit long so I could very slowly pull back on the yoke. Now, again, I do want to make it very clear that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can probably very easily adjust that by adjusting the curves. Okay, so again, this is really hard not making this stare and compare, but I know it's going to turn into that, which is why I keep mentioning Microsoft Flight Simulator. I know people are going to be asking, well, what's the comparison? What's the comparison? Right? The no flaps takeoff there. So let's talk about my first impressions right out of the gate. First flight with X-Plane 12. First flight with X-Plane 12, I think the sounds are a bit better. The overall performance of the Cessna 172 seems more realistic to me. Certainly while the handling on the ground is much better than the default 172 Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think the aircraft textures are better. I really do. Now, obviously, that's going to be subjective. That's going to vary based on your opinion. You may have a different opinion than I am. And it's going to be subjective to the developer. One developer is going to make their textures different than the other. So, which means that the quality of said textures are going to change from airplane to airplane. Okay, so keeping that in the forefront of our minds. The overall flight experience so far, I think it's too soon to tell. I'm definitely still in that nostalgic, or not nostalgic, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Like the honeymoon phase, right? I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Placebo, right? That placebo effect when you get something new. Oh, it's got to be better, so you trick yourself into thinking it's better kind of situation, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now, I think. I don't know that necessarily one is better than the other yet. And I want to emphasize, yet. You know, that just, it's too soon. I don't want to be sitting here popping off a judgment and then a week from now decide that, you know what, after flying it more, no, I think one is better than the other, right? I will say that, how do I describe X-Plane 12 flight model from my perspective, from a non-professional? Please keep in mind, guys, I'm not a pilot, so please keep in mind. It's very, very critical. If I do that, oh, yeah, I can do that. Okay. I know how to do so. Center it, and then I relax my head. Okay. I always feel like I'm so damn low in these things. Okay, so from a... okay, the track IR is going to be something I have to figure out. It's definitely behaving significantly different than Microsoft Flight Simulator. So anyway, my apologies. I didn't get sidetracked there. So from a flight perspective, from my limited experience in the real world aircraft, such as a Cessna 172, I find that I am busier in the cockpit in this simulator than I am in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I find that it is requiring more of me, and it is requiring more of me in what feels like a more natural way. It doesn't seem as simulated as what we see in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It seems much more controlled, much more natural, with a couple of hiccups in between, such as turbulence, bounces, weird little shifts, things like that, that maybe you're not quite ready for. Let me see, let's get down to about 1,700 RPMs. Let me see if we can just sort of over there and control the aircraft the rest of the way through. Okay, so let's see here. We're going to try a landing on 29er left there. 29er left actually used to be a taxiway. It's a bit shorter, it's a bit narrower. There's that descent rate. November 1720 Papa, turning final off runway 29 left, full stop. Very wide final. Probably didn't need to go that wide. And we're definitely, it feels like in a crosswind, so just sort of teeter her over here. Such. There we go. Coming 9, nice and easy. Maintaining that 1700 RPMs. Got a little slow. Going a little bit back in. And now bringing it down. Bad approach on my part. So, that could mean one of... Whoa, baby. Okay. All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about all of that for a second. Let's set that parking brake, shall we? Can I do that? There we go. Do I have to pull it back out to set it? No, that's it. Are we gonna roll? Let me try adding some power here. Okay. So while we're sitting here on the runway, which is a probably very inappropriate thing to be doing right now, let's talk about something here. The landing there. I have been used to, for a very long time, I'm going to be honest, in Microsoft Flight Simulator, very rarely do I require a very much rudder input in order to keep my aircraft centered down the runway, or I'm not going to say centered down the runway, but going in a straight line down the runway. Usually it's on the left or right lane here, but very rarely do I have a center line landing. I just am terrible at them. But very rarely does it require a lot of input from me in order to keep the aircraft on the runway. Something very tricky was happening there, and I think something very natural that is likely supposed to happen is happening back there. That did not feel like a bug. It did not feel like there was something wrong with the simulator. It felt like I was not correctly handling my aircraft on landing. I was flaring way too freaking late. I was pulling the power off way too late. These are all things that I was very easily being able to identify just on my own. I think I was coming in too hot. I came in too steep. I was not centerline. I was not stabilized. And I think that now twice on 2 separate touch and goes, I think it came back and got me. So what I am going to say is that I do believe in my initial beliefs. As of this video, my beliefs are that speaking to the Cessna 172 here at Tucson International Airport in Arizona, I'm going to say that the flight model or flight behavior, let's try to keep it that. I'm going to say that the flight behavior of the default Cessna 172 is superior to that of Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I think that it's going to be much more challenging, and I think it is so far going to be much more quote-unquote realistic. I'm using that word in quotes because I don't have enough information yet. This is just my initial impressions. So that's going to wrap up this video. So let's do some final thoughts here real quick. So for this video, my final thoughts on the comparison of Microsoft Flight Simulator to X-Plane 12 is that there is no comparison. It's going to be, what are you looking for? So speaking to the benefits that I so far see in X-Plane 12, I like the aircraft better. I think the aircraft look nicer. I think they look more realistic. And that's just, again, that's going to be subjective. That's personal preference, and you guys are all welcome to absolutely disagree with me. Nothing wrong with it. That's the beauty about the way the world works. I did enjoy the sound of the Cessna 172 quite a bit better than that of Microsoft Flight Simulator, but again, subjective. I found the difficulty of flight to be far more intense here in X-Plane 12 when talking about the transition points from takeoff, or from ground to takeoff and takeoff to airborne to landing. And specifically, as you guys saw the landing, if anything, actually I'm going to back that up a little bit. I found the takeoff to be quite a bit easier. And what I mean by easier is more control. I felt like I had more control of the simulator right out of the box without having to configure anything, change any settings, adjust axis, throw some sensitivity curves. I didn't have to do any of that. Just straight up out of the box, I felt that the takeoff was far more controlled and the aircraft did much more easily and much more naturally what I expected it to do. Obviously, the landing was extremely challenging, and I look forward to doing far more touch and goes in this to try to dive down. And what I mean by dive down is I'm going to dive into that. I'm going to keep doing touch and goes after this recording stops, and I'm going to just start making a decision. Okay, is it me, or is the simulator that unrealistic where it's just throwing me around the ground like a hockey puck? Okay, if I can start paying attention to what I'm doing, I'm going to start, really taking my time with my approaches, making sure that I'm stabilized, making sure that I'm nice and comfy, as far as the plane goes at the time that we start bringing it in. And if it's still doing that, even when I know that, okay, maybe it would do it, but not as much, then, that's something that I'll start to think about maybe changing my opinion. But I really don't believe that skidding and me sliding down the runway, I don't think that was the simulator. I think that was me. I think I was doing something wrong. And I appreciate that. That's a big step. One of the things that we've always had with the grand debate, I think, of Microsoft Flight Simulator to X-Plane 12 or even P3D comes down to game versus simulator. Now, I'm not trying to ruffle anyone's feathers with this. Again, guys, all you have to do is look at my channel and you know that I love Microsoft Flight Simulator. But there are many aspects of it to which I think fall further under the game category than under full flight simulation. And I think one of those limitations that causes that is that it is dual platform. Instead of having two separate leases, one for Xbox and one for PC, they made one for Xbox. And I think some of those limitations are things that inhibit our ability to have a higher fidelity flight model or flight dynamics or behavior, whatever you want to describe it as. That's just my personal opinion. Okay. And again, I love Microsoft Flight Simulator, so before anyone starts cussing me out and getting their feathers in a ruffle. And I think my final closing statements obviously are going to be, let's talk about the scenery. No, the scenery is nothing like Microsoft Flight Simulator. There is no comparison to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm not even going to give it a comparison. The only thing that I will say right away that stood out to me as far as visual fidelity goes is I think the cockpits of X-Plane look better. I like this cockpit, I really do. It looks very, very nice. The detail's great. All the gauges are very easy, legible, and I love the runways and the taxiways. I think they look great. But like, I'm already missing my true KTUS. For example, that air control tower, that's not even what it looks like, and obviously I can go on and on. Like right now, the real tower is actually over here on the left now. They built a new one. So those are all things that, it sucks. So it's going to really come down to, I think, over the next few videos, which we're going to be doing, is what are we getting from X-Plane 12 that we're not getting from Microsoft Flight Simulator, and who does X-Plane 12 really aim at? And that's what I'm going to try to help you guys solve over the next few days. As always, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. At the very least, found it somewhat educational. This was my very first flight in X-Plane 12. I did absolutely 0 flights before bringing you guys on board. So you guys took the first flight with me. We did this together. So all of my impressions are raw and right out of the gate. And I'm sure you guys can tell, unscripted. I do not script my videos, and this is why. I want you to know exactly what I'm thinking at the time that it happens. And which obviously causes some garbling and me to ramble a little bit, but it's ridiculous. Anyways, thank you guys for the continued support as always, and I will see you in the next one where we'll dive even further into X-Plane 12.